Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. I believe that it's time for African American comedy to step itself up and move to another level, because when I look at minstrel shows like Tyler Perry movies and movies like Girls Trip, it's clear to me that black people are being laughed at, and what's sad is you have black people creating the same minstrel images that white racists made in the 1930s. And personally, I believe we can do better, because I believe that there is an audience for more nuanced comedy and more sophisticated comedy, like I have seen in films like those created by Billy Wilder and many other great Hollywood filmmakers out here. And I believe that type of comedy can find an audience. And in many of the books that I write, I use that type of nuanced and sophisticated comedy in my stories. For example, in The Temptation of John Haynes, I use many of the comedy concepts I learned from watching Ivan Reitman's Ghostbusters. And when you look at Ivan Reitman's Ghostbusters, which was written by Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, they use comedy in a very subtle and nuanced way, and you really wouldn't pick up on it unless you really took a longer and more critical look at it. Moreover, when I was writing Spinsterella, I took concepts from the Tim Burton movie Beetlejuice and comedy concepts from there and mixed them with my own creative style to create my own style of comedy. And I could get laughs with that more subtle, nuanced, and sophisticated comedy. And black characters people were connecting with those black characters and seeing how funny they were without resorting to stereotypes and minstrel behavior. It's possible for a black character and a black viewer. I believe that it's time for African Americans to stop supporting these minstrel shows like Tyler Perry movies and movies like Girls Trip, and it's time for African American creators to start focusing on creating comedy that's a bit more subtle and a bit more nuanced. And I know it's possible to create comedy that's more subtle and nuanced, because I use that approach in many of my novels, and I get laughs from readers all the time with my approach to comedy. So I know that there is an audience for a more subtle and more sophisticated approach to comedy in the African American community. And I know that it's possible for African Americans to implement this type of comedy, where we're laughing with people and we're laughing at situations that people are in, and we're not laughing at people for being black. And when it comes down to comedy, I know that it's possible to create comedy that's more nuanced and more subtle, because, again, I have written this type of comedy in many of my novels. For example, in The Temptation of John Haynes, I used comedy methods that I studied from Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis and Bill Murray's Ghostbusters in that story, and you wouldn't really see the jokes unless you took a longer and more critical look at it. And those who have taken a longer and more critical look at it have laughed at it. And with the romance Spinsterella, I made fun of being shy and introverted, and I did it in a more subtle and nuanced way, and I took comedy stylings and approaches that I learned from Tim Burton and from watching his film Beetlejuice. So I understand that there is a more sophisticated approach to comedy, and that I believe that there is an audience for a more subtle and more sophisticated approach to comedy. Now, the first book I ever used comedy in was a book called A Recipe for Success, and from there I took concepts that I learned from Billy Wilder, the master filmmaker, and I used those as part of the comedy approach I was using. And a lot of people will read those stories and they would be entertained by them, they would enjoy them, but they would never understand the mechanics of the comedy behind them or how they worked. And that was perfect for the design, because you're not supposed to see the mechanics of the comedy. Good comedy has you laughing, again, with people about situations and understanding and identifying with that character and what they're going through. And it makes us see people as people. And when it relates to black comedy, I want black people to be seen as people, so that when people see the situations that they're going through, they can relate to those situations, identify with those situations, and see what other black people are going through. When you're looking at a minstrel show, you don't see black people as human beings. They become dehumanized because all you're seeing is an exaggerated caricature of a person. And with a minstrel, you're seeing a person making fun, being made fun of, and being dehumanized and devalued. And that's not what comedy is about. Comedy is about allowing people to connect on another level with another person, understand what that person is going through, and while you're laughing at the situation that they're in, you're understanding what they're struggling with and what they're going through. As a comedy writer, I don't see anything funny about Tyler Perry movies or movies like Girls Trip. All I see is people who have no understanding about how the mechanics of comedy works, or how jokes are supposed to be executed, or the subtle nuances of comedy that make comedies a classic that everyone can relate to from generation to generation. If you want to see how I write comedy, you can try some of my SJS Direct titles by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. And if you want to see me make more videos, you may donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.